Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Temte. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Philipp Schett joining us. Philipp is the founder and chief executive of Wave 9, a strategy execution consultancy focused on helping companies get the most out of the OKR framework, which stands for Objectives and Key Results. This is the first show that we've had on the OKR framework, so I'm really excited to talk to you today, Philipp. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited as well and hope we can bring OKRs to a few more organizations.
Yeah. So, Philipp, before we get started, give us the elevator pitch version of your story.
Absolutely. As you said, my name is Philipp Schett. I'm the founder and CEO of Wave 9. Wave 9 is a global strategy consultancy that does OKRs. That's really what we do. We do nothing else, and that's what we specialize in. I think we've gotten pretty good at it by, doing it a few more than 300 times now. And you hear my accent still after 11 years in the US. I can't hide it. I'm originally German, but moved to the US in 2014. And I consider myself now a transatlantic entrepreneur. So I'm building organizations that combine American optimism and American velocity with German precision and German engineering. At least that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we do.
Awesome. Excellent. Philipp, if you had to pick one event in your life that just put rocket boosters behind your career, what would that be?
Yeah. There's nothing that even comes close. I moved to the US, to Silicon Valley in 2014, and nothing comes close. Everything that happened in my career was a result of that one particular move. And I came to the US with a very typical origin story. I came with 2 suitcases and not much. And originally my plan was to stay a year and get to know Silicon Valley a bit and get to know a few entrepreneurs and then move back. And then, 10 years later, my parents are still hoping. And so, it's a very, very typical story. I'm a proud father of a German-American daughter now. And there's really nothing that comes close. And it is something that if you have the opportunity, especially if you're an international listener, and you can apply for a visa, you can apply for a green card, and then you can, if it works out, it is probably the best thing that you can do. The US is just a fantastic country to have a career and to build a family too.
Yeah. So was it that energy? What was it about coming into Silicon Valley that just really struck you and you're like, wow?
Yeah. So funny enough, I used to be an innovation scout for Deutsche Telekom. So before founding Wave 9, I used to work in corporate strategy, corporate innovation, first for Deutsche Telekom, known for their T-Mobile brand in the US, and then later for Facebook, now known as Meta. And what does an innovation scout do? Well, you look for new innovative ideas and then you try and implement them in Germany or in the Middle East or wherever our clients were. And I thought that the special sauce of Silicon Valley, me being very naive, would be great ideas and great thinking. But in reality, it was great execution. And it was really that ruthless prioritization that is so hard to copy sometimes because, you need guts to actually focus. And so it was not what I was expecting, because I was expecting, great ideas, but the ideas are probably good at other places too. But what really differentiates, Silicon Valley and the US in more generally from other countries is just the ability to execute on those ideas. And that's what I found. And that what is what energizes me to this date.
Excellent. Well, that's a wonderful segue into the OKR framework. Many of our listeners will not be versed in what OKRs are and what the OKR framework does. Just give us the primer. What is the OKR framework, and how does it differ from more traditional key performance indicator methods of performance measurement?
Yeah, absolutely love to. So OKR stands short for objectives and key results. So it's two parts. It's really, really simple. And the objectives are qualitative statements that tell us where we want to go. So they align us as a team on the direction. So maybe we want to internationalize. Maybe we want to grow our audience. Maybe we want to, launch a new product. Whatever that is, we would formulate that as our objective. And then the key results are quantitative statements. They tell us that we are actually making progress towards that objective. And so that's a very, very, very simple methodology. You can almost not be more simple, but it's powerful because it's not only a new syntax in which you're writing your goals, but it is a new way of thinking about your goals. So those key results shouldn't be task lists, or shouldn't be maybe just lagging indicators like your financials, but they should be something in between those. And they then tell you that you're on the right track. And just as maybe your like weight loss tips aren't necessarily difficult to understand, you just need a calorie deficit. OKRs are also not necessarily difficult to understand, but they are not necessarily easy to implement because, again, it takes you the ability to focus and to formulate really, really good key results that help you focus, instead of just writing down everything that you can think of as your key results. And the difference to KPIs is sometimes a bit difficult to explain, because your definition of KPIs might vary across organizations, right? And your definitions of OKRs could also vary. So there is no standardization and no ISO norm, no norm for either OKRs or KPIs. So if I now explain you the difference and you say, oh, but that's exactly how we use KPIs, then great, your mileage might vary. But let me still try and get it and explain some of those differences.
Yeah.
So the first one is the syntax. So again, we have qualitative and we have quantitative, and we combine those into one. But of course, a methodology wouldn't get probably the gold standard nowadays for goal setting, and wouldn't get so popular if it would really be just the syntax. So there is a bit more to the framework that makes it different. So first, you're setting your goals in shorter cycles. So most typically it's a quarter, but it can also be a month. That would be very short, or trimesters, something that's nowadays getting more and more popular. So you set it for shorter time frames than you're typically used to with traditional KPIs or traditional goal setting. Then you are focusing on really just a few. Again, the balanced scorecard, for example, might have 20, right? With OKRs, nowadays we are recommending our clients to go to 3x3. So 3 objectives with 3 key results each, and that for every team, that's already enough OKRs. So we try to really make them focused. And then, as I mentioned, the key results should be outcomes, not outputs. And I think that's already a mindset shift for most organizations that are used to ticking off their to-do lists and ticking off their tasks, which there's nothing wrong with it. I love ticking off my to-do list as well. But it's often not enough, right? What has changed because we did that task? So, for example, just publishing a blog post or publishing even 100 blog posts, okay, that's easily busy work. But if our key result then is to drive leads or to drive new signups for our service, then that's a better key result. And then once you have set those across the organization, you make them transparent for everyone. And that is also something that for many organizations is pretty radical. So imagine an organization where you can just go into a software or go into a spreadsheet and you can look up what marketing has as their goals and what product has as their goals. And maybe you can even set cross-functional goals. So that is something that, especially 10 years ago when we started, was pretty radical for many organizations that weren't used to Silicon Valley openness and transparency. So that's another very, very important difference. And then lastly, you're also setting them in most often in a different way. So most traditional goal setting frameworks that I know in organizations, and I'm old enough to remember the days when my manager came in and said, hey, these are the goals for the year. Okay, and that's it. And that doesn't typically breed a lot of excitement and a lot of energy. And it also doesn't provide a lot of context and a lot of clarity. So instead, we are trying to involve people in the where we make them participate in the goal setting process so that your goals aren't set for you, they are set with you. Oh. And so that's something we typically do in workshops. And then lastly, the last difference is that, at least the way we introduce OKRs, we introduce a very rigid and structured process of managing those. Because most often it's May or it's July now, right? We are roughly at the halftime of the year. And probably 90% of us have forgotten about our New Year's resolutions. And so that's very, very typical. It's set and forget, right? I have a great goal. Now I'm forgetting about it. And instead, we are driving weekly focus on them. And then we are with weekly calibrate meetings and celebrate meetings where we are celebrating that progress, and then monthly business reviews and quarterly resets. So it's a shorter cycle and a very transparent one too.
Yeah. That transparency part of the OKR framework, I think, is really key here. So that then leads us into what kinds of companies are best suited to adopt the OKR framework. What flavor of companies should be thinking about doing this?
Yeah, OKRs have a really, really broad reach. Right? I know wedding planners and couple counselors that work with OKRs. And so you will see OKRs really nowadays almost everywhere. Now, still, it's less about the industry and it's less about the geography. So you don't need to be a tech company in Silicon Valley. It sometimes helps, but I actually think that the benefits are even more and higher in other organizations. Yeah. So if you have a need to align the organization because something is changing, right? Your strategy is shifting, your markets are shifting, some change is there, and you need to be agile and you need to be adaptive, then very often OKRs should be in your consideration list. And then if you want to drive accountability without micromanaging, so accountability on outcomes instead of outputs, right? I'm running Wave 9 as well. I hate managing on to-do lists. I try and hire adults that are responsible for outcomes. Doesn't always work, but luckily in most cases, and I have a fantastic team that is able to be managed with outcomes, right? We align on, okay, these are the few things that we want to drive change towards, and then people are holding themselves and each other accountable. And I think that's something, if that's a problem in your organization, and I don't know many organizations where that isn't a problem, then you should really, really think about organizations. Yeah. About OKRs. But let me give you 3 types of organizations that I personally love working with that you might not expect. And so the first one is incumbent family-owned organizations. For some reason, we have numerous clients now that are in the third or fourth generation of a family-owned business. And I love working with those organizations. We have a fantastic client in Wyoming, and it's a regional telco. And first of all, they are doing amazing work because they are connecting rural parts of the country that need good internet too, right? And that really can benefit from them. But also, OKRs are great because it delivers some new energy in them, right? The advantage of those companies is that there's a lot of stability for everyone. The disadvantage is that stability sometimes comes with a bit of lower energy and lower urgency. And so OKRs can drive a bit more urgency there. And then we love working with mission-driven organizations, often nonprofits. And I particularly love working with them because, well, often enough, I'm a huge fan of their missions. But also, they very often have a huge need for more data and more clarity. So they're often behind a mission that is energizing everyone, but then they maybe have alignment issues, and they aren't all really pulling in the same direction, and there's often a bit of chaos. And so those are organizations that we just also work with, love working with. And then lastly, if you're an international organization and you have really collaborators across the world, Wave 9 actually, the 9 stands for the 9 hours of time difference between Silicon Valley and Germany, my home country.
Okay. That's what
that has
stands
dominated
for.
my life for a very, very long time, because either I was waking up at like 5 a.m. to have calls with Europe, or I'm awake until 1 a.m. because I have calls with the West Coast. And so if you can avoid a call because you're aligned on outcomes, then that's actually much, much better. And so it makes everyone's life a lot easier. So if you should always think about OKRs in almost every circumstance, but especially for those that I mentioned, that's something where I can really recommend it.
Yeah. So you did a little myth busting there, because I think a lot of people think that the OKR framework is kind of reserved for Silicon Valley startups or really fast moving agile organizations. And you just took us through family firms and nonprofits and international businesses that move a little bit more slowly and methodically at times, and you're telling us that the OKR framework fits those business models as well. So thank you for that, Philip. We're going to take a really short commercial break, and we'll be right back. Hey everyone, I'd like to invite you to start your weekend with me on the Saturday Morning Muse podcast. I briefly explore topics that span leadership, business management, education, and personal continuous improvement. Subscribe to the Saturday Morning Muse podcast on your favorite podcast streaming app, or visit andrewtemte.com for more information. And we're back with Philipp Schett talking about corporate strategy, goal setting, and the OKR framework, the objectives and key results framework. Philipp, in my experience, whenever a new quote-unquote system is adopted within a business, there's significant pushback from the quote-unquote, we've always done it this way and we don't want to learn anything new crowd. What role does change management play in the Wave 9 OKR engagement philosophy?
You're spot on. It's not everyone loves OKRs, and not everyone loves transparency. I get it, right? You've been with the company maybe for 20 years, and now suddenly someone is looking at the value you're creating as a team. It's necessary and it's good, but yes, not everyone loves it. Not everyone loves change. I get that. And so change management is one of our 5 main pillars. So whenever we introduce OKRs, then we install 5 necessary pillars. The other 4 being a dedicated team that drives the process, a strong process that we define, right? That we actually also document, and not only like that is there intentional, not just happens. Then training, because you can't imagine that people are excited about something that they don't understand and that they don't get trained on. And then the engaging OKR workshops themselves. But then change management is the fifth pillar. And surprisingly, the more challenging type of resistance isn't necessarily the open resistance. Yes, I mean, I see open resistance very, very often, but at least I can address it, right? At least I can talk to someone, and very often, and sometimes over a beer, I can talk to someone, and then I can understand their nuances, right? And their concerns, and then maybe I can take them away, and maybe sometimes I don't. But very often, those concerns aren't really grounded in something they just aren't excited about change. Maybe because they weren't involved in the decision-making process, right? And so I always tell CEOs, if they are excited about OKRs and if they're excited about working with us, that's great. But you got to sell, not tell to your people. And so you got, maybe it took you 6 months to be convinced of OKRs and maybe even more of Wave 9. And now you're expecting that everyone is excited about it in a 45-minute webinar? They don't know. It's not likely, right? And it's at least not given. And so, yes, but something that's even more difficult to deal with is what we call OKR washing. So because OKRs are often just a syntax for goals, it is sometimes people say, yes, this is great, this is exciting, and then they just write down whatever they did before, no change, and now they call it OKRs. Right. And so that is sometimes a bit more difficult to deal with, because you have to say to someone that sometimes, at least, that their child is ugly. And so and something that they are very proud of, their new set of OKRs, isn't actually what we would consider a good set of OKRs. So that is often a bit more difficult and needs a bit more nuance to the change management.
Yeah. The teams or the leaders who go, yeah, this is great, and then they go back to exactly what they were doing before, or worse yet, they actively are working behind the scenes to derail what the organization is trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that, Philipp. One of the most critical balancing acts in business is the balancing act between organizational trust and accountability. We want a healthy organization, but we also have to get things done. How does the adoption of the OKR framework help finding that balance more achievable?
Yeah. It's true, and it's a balance that even AI, right, will not solve for us soon, because the balance is much more human, and a much more human problem and a human challenge than it is a technology challenge, right? But OKRs can definitely help with that balance. So first of all, because OKRs are transparent, it creates more clarity, and it also can create more trust. So how often did you have internal politics in an organization because teams were not trusting each other, and teams were thinking that the other team was actually working towards another goal, right? And now you are, and in so many organizations, I've seen people identify the foe within their own company instead of the competition that is out there, right? And so that transparency can actually breed trust. And then you cannot balance accountability and trust without clarity. So if it isn't clear what you are accountable for, how am I holding anyone accountable? And that accountability typically doesn't come from out of thin air. You have to really work hard to make it absolutely clear of what someone is accountable for or a team is accountable for. And accountability sometimes gets a bad rep because it's often or sometimes used as the wielding stick when something went off the charts. But look, in a good sports team, there are very clear accountabilities, right? Very clear. Okay, this is your job. This is my job. You are offense. I'm defense, right? And it's very very clear, and that clarity is a prerequisite for accountability. And then OKRs can also help with providing managers a way to give more and leaders a better way to give more frequent feedback. And so often organizations are struggling with that balancing act in my experience because you're just giving feedback once a year in an annual review. And that has a lot of bias, recency bias, and then I'm just doing a great job in November, December, and then you don't have the data, and then you really and peer feedback is okay, but it's not a great way of giving or providing feedback regularly. And so a better way is you have OKRs and then you give regular, ideally, of course, weekly, but regular bi-weekly or at least monthly feedback and coaching to your team members. And so again, open books, open doors, open dialogue, all of that are, in my opinion and in my experience, really important cornerstones of driving and balancing accountability and trust.
Yeah, there's, we're talking about the kind of opening things up in an organization where the functional area leaders can't point fingers over there and, all the problems are over there. Everything's fine in my department. That kind of everybody knowing what everybody else is doing is a real advantage of that framework. So, Philip, really quickly, last question. Suppose that you have a CEO sitting in front of you right now who has resisted implementation of formal strategy, goal setting, and measurement frameworks because, well, things just move too fast and goal setting ends up being a big waste of time. What's your advice to this individual to help them see the benefits of proper goal setting and working with Wave 9?
First of all, I hear you. I run a business too. I hate nothing more than wasting time, right? And employees' time is really, really important. But and it's often very expensive too. But because of that, we really need to make sure that they are working not only like the busy bees that many are, but they are working on the right things.
Yeah.
And how do we do that? Well, we aren't only aligning on outputs and actions. We are also making sure that we measure how impactful those are. And that is an alignment that if it doesn't happen, in most cases, you're wasting effort on initiatives that don't move the needle. Like, you're all busy. Everyone's working every hour of the working day, and still you're not making the progress you're hoping for. Then probably you're working on the wrong initiatives. And how will you know? Well, you need to align on the outcomes that are actually moving the needle, and only managing by lagging indicators like your financials and maybe EBITDA and maybe revenue is really, really difficult because when you make a decision as a CEO, until that has revenue impact in a large organization, 6-9 months later, you're flying blind. And so you want to have alignment and outcomes. You probably want to have alignment and more leading indicators that actually tell you data. And lastly, much of that work is happening anyway. So many parts of the organization are setting goals, and then they are using many different frameworks. We just worked with an organization of about 100 people. And when we started, we identified that they were working with 8 different goal-setting methodologies: KPIs, MBOs, V2 moms, very interesting framework, and then everything under the sun. And so you can't have a shared language of success without aligning on that language first. So, and I get it. We often say that we want to implement a process for everyone that hates process, because you don't need to make it big, right? You don't need to have the next 5 years planned out. Often you just need to be directionally correct. And that's and that can happen in an hour per team if need be, right? So that's and you will get much more payout than 1 hour saved.
Yeah, I what I'm hearing is that you're teaching people, your people, how to differentiate between busy and just spinning the wheel around and around, and value, and the actual value that's being created, and really shining a bright light on that difference, because we're all busy. We can all convince ourselves that we're so busy we can't do anything else, but are we really adding value? And that's the question that this can help solve. Philipp, thank you for that. If you don't mind, we'll do just a few lightning round questions to close out our time together.
Of course.
All right. You just won $100 million lotto jackpot, but there's a stipulation that half of your net winnings go to one philanthropic organization or a cause in general. Who do you pick as the recipient?
Yeah. I would pick Save the Children, and specifically their education programs, because I do believe that access to education is the most important guarantee for fairness and in a society. It helps people without maybe the right environment, and that didn't grow up financially independent and financially free to get there. And I think that without access to education, or with access to good and ideally free education, we would live in better societies. So that's where I would live. I would give my share.
Awesome. Second, if I give you access to a rudimentary time machine and you can send a message to an earlier version of yourself, what's the message and what previous version do you send it to?
Yeah. I would send it to me 15 years ago, and I would say 2 things. So the first thing is, and I'm still trying to say the same to me now, is don't be so nervous and don't be so stressed and don't be so anxious. Yes, there are going to be highs and lows, but you're going to survive, and you stressing out about everything doesn't make it better, and you're just going to stress everyone out around you. And then the second one is, hey, if you want to do something, do it, and do it earlier. So I waited until I was 29 to move to the US. I should have moved 5 years earlier. I should have gotten married 5 years earlier. I should have gotten kids 5 years earlier. So everything should have happened a bit earlier. I'm absolutely happy where I am right now and where life is and how life has treated me. And I'm very privileged and very happy. But if I would have a time machine, I would just say, hey, it's easier to do all of that if you're younger.
Take the risk, take the leap, do it now.
Yes.
Philipp, we're all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get fit again. I used to run marathons in California, Oakland, San Francisco, Sacramento, and now I got access to the Berlin Marathon this year, which is often oversubscribed. And now, 7 years after my last marathon, I have to get back in shape. And so that is an important cornerstone. And then at Wave 9, I'm going to, well, hopefully develop the next generation of leaders within the organization. And as I told you, I got stressed out about everything and about every little detail in the company, and about every project. And I'm blessed with a great generation of new leaders, or of leaders that are in the organization sometimes or working with me sometimes for a decade, and that I'm really ready to take on the next step. And the next step for me is, well, give them the platform to be successful and not micromanage maybe as much as I did maybe in the past.
Yes, grow your people, let go just a little bit. It's one of the hardest things for an entrepreneur and a business leader to do. Philipp, it was fantastic having you on the show today. Where can folks get a hold of you?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I think that's the channel of choice, and that's where I would love to connect with you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. My name is Andy Temte. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services as well as out on YouTube. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this public good with your friends and your colleagues. The show is produced by Nicholas Temte. We'll see you next time on the Balancing Act.